Today, blockchain data firm Elliptic ties missing FTX funds to Russian hackers. And former federal prosecutor Daniel Silva breaks down the latest in the trial of Sam Bankman-Fried. Welcome to CNBC's Crypto World. I'm Talia Kaplan. Crypto prices lower again this morning. By noon Eastern, Bitcoin still traded below $27,000. Ether fell more than 1%, trading below $1550, and Solana dropped about 3.5%. Now, this comes as data released today reveals costs for consumers here in the U.S. rose more than expected last month. Then there's the latest in the Middle East as the war between Israel and Hamas escalates. The Israeli military said it was preparing for a possible ground assault on Gaza. Okay, let's get to the latest headlines. Blockchain analytics firm Elliptic has a new lead on the millions in crypto stolen from FTX in the midst of its collapse. A total of $477 million were removed from the exchange in the days after it declared bankruptcy, and who exactly moved those funds remained a mystery. Well, Elliptic now says some of those stolen assets have been combined with Bitcoin being laundered by groups tied to Russian hackers. The firm pointed to ransomware gangs and darknet markets as being part of the movement of funds and said evidence points to the involvement of an intermediary in Russia. And keeping with FTX, we're once again closely watching the trial of SBF. Caroline Ellison is back on the stand for a third day of testimony, this time facing cross-examination from Sam Bankman-Fried's defense. Ellison told the court that at times SBF didn't pay much attention to Alameda Research, leaving some of the day-to-day operations to Ellison and a former co-CEO, and then just Ellison when she was named sole CEO. Ellison also told the court that SBF was unaware that longtime FTX customers were still putting money into Alameda's bank account even after FTX's own bank account was put in place. Ellison admitted that she and the former co-CEO could have been better leaders at Alameda. She said she thought about resigning, but obviously that didn't happen. She also talked a bit about her periodic romantic relationship with SBF, saying they limited their communication to Signal after a breakup in the spring of 2022, despite still living in the same Bahamas apartment. By the way, she also revealed she was in a new relationship with a former FTX and Alameda employee at the time of the collapse. For more on how the trial is going so far, I spoke to former federal prosecutor Daniel Silva. He gave me his take on the prosecution team's strategy. During your decade at the U.S. Attorney's Office, you built a financial crimes task force that targeted all kinds of fraud and anti-money laundering violations. Recently, you helped prosecute the BitConnect case. In February of last year, the founder of that crypto investment platform was charged with orchestrating a global multi-billion-dollar Ponzi scheme. At the time, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of California said it was believed to be the largest crypto fraud ever charged. Now, here we are in week 2 of the Sam Bankman-Fried trial, so I'm curious to get your take on this case and how it compares to the BitConnect case you helped prosecute.
Sure, thank you. That record stood for a very short amount of time, sadly. The FTX trial and the SBF trial is slightly different than the BitConnect case. In the BitConnect case, the cryptocurrency, the digital assets, they were the foundation of the fraud. Dissimilarly, in FTX, it seems like they were actually selling and investing in cryptocurrencies, and they had a platform that worked. The crime, as alleged, however, was that Alameda Research, the hedge fund that SBF and his colleagues formed, were basically taking FTX customer accounts and using FTX customers' money as their own personal piggy bank. And so $8 billion is now alleged to have gone missing. And what you have is much more of a traditional corporate fraud scandal as opposed to a cryptocurrency fraud scandal.
So while Sam Bankman-Fried pleaded not guilty to the 7 charges against him, some of his former colleagues and closest friends pleaded guilty to federal charges against them and have been cooperating with prosecutors. They're testifying against him, and now new information is coming to the surface. So we already heard from Gary Wang, who co-founded FTX with SBF, and now we're hearing from Caroline Ellison, the former CEO of Alameda Research, the crypto exchange's sister hedge fund. This week, she testified that SBF directed her to steal billions from FTX. So how damaging is testimony like that for SBF?
Extremely. These are his former colleagues. Caroline Ellison was apparently his girlfriend. I mean, these are people who lived with him, worked with him, built the companies up from the ground floor. They know SBF personally and as the architect of this alleged fraud. So the fact that they have both pleaded guilty and are now testifying against SBF and basically saying, we committed these crimes, but we didn't do it alone. We did it with and at the direction of SBF. This is very, very devastating testimony against SBF. That said, one of the things that I've found interesting is oftentimes prosecutors will find contemporaneous communications or other evidence that confirms and corroborates what these witnesses are saying. Obviously, there's the argument that SBF will expectedly make that Gary Wang and Ellison are only saying that SBF knew about this fraud and directed them to commit this fraud and conspired to commit this fraud only so that they can get a reduced jail sentence. Typically, what prosecutors do is they will show a text message that says, oh, SBF directed Ellison to commit fraud. Or Wang, you will testify and say, I thought this was wrong at the time. And then there will be an email where he says, hey, SBF, this is wrong. We shouldn't be doing this anymore. Having not followed the trial perfectly, nor having been present at any of the testimony or court hearings, that seems to be one of the things that perhaps might be a bit lacking from the prosecution's case. That said, one of the interesting facts that came out recently was that SBF directed people to be careful what they put in writing and used digital communication applications that actually had disappearing messages. So that might explain why there's limited corroborating evidence based on this testimony of these cooperators.
So now that we're in the second week of the SBF trial, what are you noticing is the prosecutor's strategy?
Exactly what we've been talking about. Cooperators who were there, who committed the same crimes that SBF is alleged to have committed, and telling the jury and the court and the world, SBF was aware of these. He directed the cooperators to commit those crimes, and obviously he profited from it as well. That's one of the things that I don't think has come out fully yet, is how profitable all of this was. I think this is very, very compelling testimony. This is, there's already been one book written about it. Michael Lewis wrote his book. Somehow that got published the first week of trial. But on top of that, if you take a step back, if you're a juror and you're listening to this, this is almost the script of a movie already written. Friends, lovers, billions of dollars testifying against them in open court in this dramatic confrontation, having to point out and identify SBF from the witness stand. What I'm really looking for, over and above the continued testimony that the United States puts on, is what the defense will do once the case gets turned over to it, if anything. So in this case, the big question is, will SBF testify? I don't think he will, but I also didn't think he'd go to trial because the evidence seems very, very damning. The other thing is the continued cross-examination of these witnesses that the United States calls, trying to discern what the tactic is from SBF and his defense. What it seems to be developing is that SBF is going to make the argument ultimately to the jury that he was not the operator of these transactions. He was not the day-to-day manager of these businesses. He was the savant. He was the ideas guy. He was the one who came up with these brilliant techniques and technologies, but he wasn't writing the code. Gary Wang was. He wasn't running Alameda Research. Caroline Ellison was. And so you can see how he can say, I didn't know of any fraud, which is a fact that the United States has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And even if I knew about it, or at least what was happening, there was no intent to defraud anyone on my part. That was them. They wanted to defraud them. I thought we were doing everything legally. That's going to be the very interesting thing to see, one, what the argument is, and then two, whether the jury believes it.
Okay, that's all for Crypto World today, but we'll be back again tomorrow with the latest on the SBF trial, and we'll see you then.